Have you ever wondered why some of the most powerful moments in your life felt too sacred to share, as if speaking them aloud might shatter their meaning or invite something unwanted into their purity? There is a reason the deepest truths are often cloaked in silence, and those chosen by God are not marked by how loudly they speak, but by what they quietly protect. There is a quiet and reverent mystery surrounding the idea of being chosen by God. It is not a status to be advertised, nor a role to be paraded. It is rather a calling carried silently in the deep places of the soul. To be chosen is not to be exalted above others, but to be weighed down with greater responsibility. It is not a placement upon a pedestal, but a placement upon a path, one often narrow, misunderstood, and lonely. Many who have been called by God discover quickly that the road is not paved with applause, but with surrender. It demands more than obedience. It demands the death of self-glory. And this is where the heart must tread carefully. The temptation to proclaim one's chosenness is subtle and often disguised as testimony, but when it springs from the desire to be seen or admired, it corrodes the very holiness of the calling. Those whom God chooses are often hidden. Their power lies not in their platform, but in their posture, on their knees in secret places, unseen by the world but fully known to heaven. Their work is not to convince others of their anointing, but to remain faithful to the one who gave it. The moment a person begins to broadcast their spiritual title, they risk shifting their focus from God's mission to their own image. Divine selection is not a badge to wear, but a burden to bear, and it must be borne with reverence and self-forgetfulness. There is a strange paradox in spiritual matters. The more a person tries to prove their calling, the more it diminishes. Authentic chosenness is self-evident. It reveals itself in action, in character, and in the quiet authority that flows from deep communion with God. It does not shout. It does not need to be defended. It simply is. And those who are truly chosen are too busy walking in obedience to spend time arguing about their place. Throughout the course of sacred history, the chosen ones were never the loudest nor the most adorned. They were the shepherds, the exiles, the prisoners, the dreamers in forgotten wells. They were the ones who heard God in silence and followed him in the dark. Their greatness was not in being chosen, but in remaining faithful when the choosing demanded their comfort, their plans, and even their reputations. They rarely declared themselves chosen because they knew the cost attached to it. They had no time for self-exaltation. They were too occupied with dying to themselves, again and again. To be chosen is not to be celebrated by men. It is to be watched by heaven. It is to carry a message that is not yours, and to speak words that were not born from your own mind. The chosen understand that they are vessels, not sources, that what flows through them is not their own, and therefore not theirs to boast about. Their strength lies in their silence, their wisdom in their restraint, and their glory in their God, not in their role. There will always be the temptation to reveal what God is doing in you, to prove that your life carries a weight others might not see. But that is not the way of those truly chosen. They understand that silence is not passivity, it is protection. That secrecy is not deception, it is sanctity. The deeper the calling, the quieter the journey. They do not fear being overlooked, for they know that the one who called them sees in secret, and that is enough. There are certain things God places within a soul that are not meant to be shared. They are not hidden out of shame or secrecy, but because they are too holy for common speech. Some dreams, some revelations, some whispers in the dark. These are not for the ears of others. They are treasures meant to be pondered, not displayed. In a world that encourages the constant unveiling of one's inner life for attention or affirmation, there is a quiet strength in keeping sacred things sacred. When God gives you something, whether it's a promise, a burden, a vision, or an instruction, it is often meant to remain between you and Him until the right time, or perhaps forever. To speak it too soon is to risk diminishing its purpose or exposing it to voices that cannot understand its weight. The temptation to share is understandable. There is comfort in being understood. An affirmation can feel like confirmation, but not every listener is equipped to steward what you carry. What is holy to you may seem foolish to someone else, and once it has been cast before others, it is no longer in the quiet, guarded place of intimacy. It becomes open to questioning, ridicule, distortion, or worse, pride. A sacred trust, once vocalized prematurely, can lose its clarity. There is a reason why some of the most pivotal moments in Scripture occurred in solitude. God spoke in dreams, in deserts, in caves, in prisons, and those who received the message often sat with it in silence, sometimes for years, before speaking it aloud. Guarding what God gives you is not about fear, it's about reverence. There is a holy weight in being entrusted with something from heaven. It should not be treated casually or used to elevate one's spiritual reputation. Divine instruction is not a stage prop. It's not a line in a performance or a tool for admiration. It's a call to obedience and sometimes to secrecy. The most powerful revelations often arrive with the quiet instruction. Wait until the soil is ready. Wait until hearts are soft. Wait until the fullness of time. Speaking too soon is like planting a seed in winter and wondering why it didn't grow. There is also the matter of protection. Some things are hidden because they are still forming. Speaking them exposes them to scrutiny and attack before they have roots. Just as a newborn child is kept close, covered, guarded from harsh winds and loud crowds, so too must the things of the Spirit be shielded while they are growing. What you protect in silence may one day bloom in public, but it must first be nurtured in private. Silence is not weakness, it is wisdom. It gives space for God to work, to refine, to prepare both you and the world for what's coming. This is a difficult discipline in a world of noise. The urge to announce, to explain, to defend what you've been given can be overwhelming. But those who are truly led by the Spirit understand the value of quiet obedience. They do not need applause to validate their direction. They do not need witnesses to know their path is sure. The voice of God was enough in the dark, and it remains enough in the waiting. Holding your tongue does not mean hiding your light. It means letting your light grow strong enough to burn without flickering when the time to shine finally comes. In all things, discernment must guide you. Not everything sacred must be spoken. Not every dream is for sharing. There is a kind of faith that chooses silence, not out of timidity, but out of trust, that the one who spoke it will also fulfill it in his way, in his time, without the need for spectacle or defense. Spiritual pride is one of the most deceptive forms of self-exaltation because it often disguises itself in language that sounds holy. It doesn't announce itself with arrogance or boastfulness in the traditional sense. Rather, it quietly slips into the soul through the desire to be seen as righteous, enlightened, or favored. It takes moments of genuine intimacy with God and distorts them into opportunities for personal validation. The danger lies not in the experience itself, but in what one chooses to do with it. Divine encounters are not merit badges to be displayed, but moments of transformation that should lead to greater humility, not self-importance. When one begins to share spiritual experiences, not for edification, but for applause, admiration, or credibility, the original beauty of the moment is tainted. The human heart is wired to seek meaning, and sometimes in that search, the desire to be special can override the call to be faithful. When someone begins to think, even subtly, that their experiences with God place them above others, they have already started drifting from the spirit of true intimacy. God does not choose people to be admired, He chooses them to serve. And those who truly understand what it means to be in God's presence are often the most hesitant to speak of it. They are not trying to impress, they are trying to obey. The more deeply someone walks with God, the more they see how small they truly are in the vastness of His holiness. Pride shrinks under the weight of real encounter. Yet, when pride remains, it often means the encounter has become more about the self than about the divine. This distortion often begins subtly. A well-meaning testimony turns into a veiled boast. A private prayer becomes a public performance. A divine word is shared not for encouragement, but for authority. Over time, the person begins to measure their worth, not by their obedience, but by their spiritual experiences. The temptation grows to speak of dreams, visions, or revelations in ways that draw attention to oneself rather than to the one who gave them. And in doing so, the heart shifts its loyalty. What was once about God becomes about image. What was once sacred becomes spectacle. It is not that spiritual experiences should never be shared. There are moments when testimonies are powerful, needed, and God-ordained. But the motive matters more than the message. The heart must be examined deeply. Am I sharing this to glorify God or to glorify myself? Am I seeking to encourage others or to elevate my status? Pride is not always loud. It often whispers in spiritual language and dresses itself in holy garments. That's what makes it so dangerous. It can deceive even the most sincere believer if they are not watchful. One of the clearest signs of spiritual pride is the compulsion to be recognized as spiritually advanced. It might show up in the need to correct others constantly, the desire to be consulted as an authority, or the subtle joy found in being seen as deep or chosen. It might even surface in the resentment felt when others don't recognize one's calling. But all of these are symptoms of a heart that has shifted from reverence to self-promotion. God resists the proud, even the spiritually proud, because pride, in any form, creates distance from Him. The chosen ones who carry His truth are not meant to draw others to themselves. They are meant to disappear behind the message, so that all attention goes to the author, not the messenger. True spirituality is marked not by how much one says, but by how much one loves. Not by how much one knows, but by how much one surrenders. Pride cannot survive in the presence of a God who requires everything, and so the chosen must be on guard, not just against external enemies, but against the internal desire to be seen, applauded, and revered for what was never theirs to claim in the first place. The adversary, subtle in his strategy and ancient in his schemes, often gains access not through the actions of the chosen ones, but through their words. There is a profound connection between what is spoken and what is targeted. Many battles that seemed to erupt out of nowhere were actually invited through carelessness of speech. The enemy cannot read the mind, but he listens closely to what is declared aloud. A spoken word, especially when it reveals plans, vulnerabilities, or sacred assignments, becomes an open gate through which resistance, confusion, or temptation may enter. It is not merely that loose words are risky, it is that they become weapons in the wrong hands when they disclose what should have been guarded. The spiritual realm is not passive, it watches and responds. When a person speaks of divine directions or breakthroughs prematurely, they may unwittingly alert the very forces that seek to derail those purposes. The adversary crafts opposition not from thin air, but from the whispers and proclamations of the unwary. This is why silence has always been a weapon of the wise. Those who have walked deeply with God know that to speak is to sow, and what is sown carelessly may bring a harvest of trouble. Even in moments of excitement or spiritual high, discernment must rule the tongue. What is said in a moment of vulnerability or zeal can become a source of delay, detour, or even destruction. Many who have been called find themselves under sudden spiritual assault, not realizing that their words had already exposed their path. The strategy of the enemy is never random. It is tailored, precise, and often waits until the most opportune moment. A plan revealed too early becomes a plan attacked. A revelation shared without covering becomes a revelation challenged. Not because it wasn't from God, but because it was spoken outside the shelter of divine timing. This is not to suggest that one should live in fear, but rather in holy caution. There is a difference between boldness and recklessness. Boldness follows God's prompting. Recklessness speaks without waiting. Throughout the ages, those chosen by God have often been instructed to be silent, not as a form of passivity, but as a form of wisdom. It was in silence that Joseph's dream could have matured, but instead, spoken too soon, it brought jealousy and betrayal. It was in quiet trust that Mary held the angel's message in her heart, not announcing it to the world. These are not coincidences, they are patterns. The enemy is drawn to noise, but he is confused by silence. He thrives on chaos, but he stumbles in the stillness where obedience is hidden. To speak of every movement God makes in one's life is to surrender an advantage. The chosen ones are not called to explain their journey, but to walk it. They are not commanded to broadcast their calling, but to fulfill it. Silence, in this sense, is not weakness. It is a shield. It protects the holy from being trampled, the tender from being scorched, the unfinished from being stolen. The enemy cannot destroy what he does not know. He cannot resist what has not been revealed. So many suffer not because they were wrong, but because they were loud in the presence of one who listens for vulnerability. There is power in concealment, not for deception, but for preservation. What God entrusts to his own is sacred, and sacred things are not to be thrown into common arenas. The enemy does not need an invitation if the door is left wide open through careless words. The wise know that the most potent truths are often spoken last, not first. They carry their callings like sealed scrolls, only to be opened when the one who gave them says, "Now." Until then, they wait, speak little, and walk forward, protected by the silence that the enemy cannot penetrate. The journey of a chosen one is not only marked by the battles they fight and the visions they carry, but by the relationships they maintain. Among the most tender and vulnerable aspects of this journey is the matter of the heart. Feelings, affections, and unspoken desires. These are not merely emotions, they are reflections of deep longings, sometimes connected to the destiny a person carries. To reveal them carelessly, especially in the early stages, is to place something precious into hands that may not understand its weight. Love, attraction, even simple emotional affection, when spoken of too soon, can lead to confusion, misalignment, or even manipulation. The heart speaks in a quiet language, and not everyone has the ears to hear it rightly. When a chosen one begins to share the stirrings of affection or the inner dialogue of the soul regarding someone they care about, they open the door not only to vulnerability, but to influence. If those feelings are not yet fully discerned or sanctified, they can become a foothold for distraction or deviation. One of the enemy's favorite tactics is to use relationships, especially emotional ones, to derail divine assignments. And he does not always do so through obvious temptation. Sometimes he uses timing. A feeling shared too soon can create false expectations. A desire voiced without clarity can lead to entanglements that were never meant to be formed. There is a time to speak of the heart, but it must come after a season of watching, praying, and discerning. The chosen must first examine their feelings in the presence of God, not in the presence of people, for even the purest emotion, if not surrendered, can become an idol. Many have mistaken emotional intensity for spiritual confirmation. Many have confused chemistry with calling. And once spoken aloud, the feeling becomes a force, one that pushes decisions, stirs emotions, and sometimes causes people to interpret signs that were never there. This is why silence is not only wisdom, it is protection. There is also the matter of stewardship. The feelings God allows within us are not accidents. They serve a purpose, often tied to growth, healing, or preparation. To treat them as light things is to treat the process lightly. The heart is sacred ground. What one chooses to feel, and more so what one chooses to express, should be done with deep reverence. To confide in someone who is not yet part of the story is to risk writing chapters that God never intended. And feelings once shared rarely return to silence. They move, they stir, they complicate. What could have been held in simplicity now becomes an emotional narrative that demands resolution. Furthermore, sharing feelings too quickly can also damage the other person. They may not be ready to carry the weight of your affection or attention. They may misinterpret your openness as direction, or worse, they may respond in ways that fracture your focus or distort your journey. Not everyone is meant to know the depths of what you feel. Some are only passing through your story. To give them access to your heart's inner chamber is to grant them influence they were never meant to wield. This is not a call to emotional suppression, but to sacred discernment. The heart is not the enemy. It is a vital part of who we are, but it must be governed. It must be offered to God before it is ever offered to another. Feelings are not lies, but they are not always truth either. They are signals, not destinations. And until God confirms what they mean and what role they play, it is wise to keep them between you and Him. To reveal them too soon is to risk planting seeds in soil that was never meant to receive them. It is to take what is precious and place it where it cannot be protected. And the cost of that mistake is often far greater than the comfort of early expression. One of the most subtle yet significant things a chosen one must guard is the exact nature of their spiritual gifting and divine instructions. These are not casual insights or talents to be paraded for admiration. They are tools, often weapons, crafted for specific battles in specific seasons. To reveal them carelessly is to risk their power being diminished by misunderstanding or, worse, manipulation. The world does not always respond kindly to those who carry divine assignments. Sometimes it mocks, sometimes it envies, and at other times it attempts to control or exploit what it cannot comprehend. The chosen must walk in the tension of being known by God but hidden from man until the appointed time. When someone prematurely reveals their gifting, they risk exposing it to forces not yet aligned with their purpose. Divine instructions are often tailored to a specific time and context, and when shared with the wrong audience, they can be twisted, questioned, or misinterpreted. Not everyone who hears your purpose will understand it. Some will doubt it, not because it lacks truth, but because it was not revealed to them. Others may try to replicate it or attach themselves to it, not from reverence, but from a desire to benefit. Gifting, when exposed without discernment, draws attention, and attention is not always favorable. Some will want to silence you. Others will want to shape you into their idea of what your gift should look like. There is also a sacred intimacy between the chosen and the one who chooses. When God entrusts someone with insight, revelation, or a spiritual weapon, it is not merely for show. it is for mission. The power of that trust lies in the discretion with which it is handled. The more one reveals, the more one invites spiritual opposition. The enemy is not omniscient. He learns through observation and revelation. When a person speaks of what God has told them in detail, they equip not only allies, but adversaries. There are battles that arise not because a person is wrong, but because they spoke too soon. Silence shields. It cloaks the chosen one in mystery that cannot be easily countered. Furthermore, spiritual gifts mature in hiddenness. The early stages of any divine gift are delicate, like a plant not yet rooted. They must be sheltered from strong winds and harsh scrutiny. To speak of them too early is to place them under a spotlight they cannot yet bear. Gifting needs time to develop strength, accuracy, and purpose. During this time, it must be guarded, not only from the outside world, but from the ego that might grow from being special. The chosen must always remember they are carriers, not creators of the gift, and until God says go, they must remain in the posture of. There is also the danger of pressure. Once a gifting is made public, expectations follow. People begin to expect results, words, miracles, or wisdom on demand. This can lead the chosen to operate out of performance rather than obedience, out of fear of disappointing others rather than fear of God. A gift used under pressure loses its purity. It becomes contaminated with the need to prove rather than the desire to serve. That is why the gift and the instructions that come with it must be held with reverence and restraint. Not every insight needs to be shared. Not every word must be spoken. Not every vision is for public consumption. True spiritual authority grows in silence and obedience. The chosen are often misunderstood because they carry things they cannot yet explain, but that is part of the calling. Revelation comes with responsibility, and that responsibility begins with secrecy. Only in silence can some things be protected long enough to fulfill their divine purpose. A gift given is not a gift to flaunt. It is a seed to be planted, watered, and harvested in God's time. And only those who understand the weight of what they carry will have the strength to carry it to completion. To be chosen by God is not a badge to display, but a burden to bear with sacred discretion. The path of the chosen is not marked by loud declarations or constant explanations, but by quiet obedience and guarded reverence. There are things too holy to be shared, too delicate to be exposed to the winds of public opinion or the claws of spiritual opposition. What God whispers in secret must often remain in secret until His appointed time. Every word spoken prematurely becomes a door the enemy may walk through. Every truth unveiled too early becomes a target. Silence, then, is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is the shield of those entrusted with divine assignments, the cloak of those whose strength lies not in what they say, but in what they carry. The chosen are not called to be understood by everyone. They are called to be faithful to the one who chose them. And in that faithfulness there is power, quiet, unshakable, and eternally protected.